So I think again the environmental determinism thing that I keep bringing up is kind of an interesting one. So again, if the weather changes, does that then dictate what culture does with that? And then what culture does with that, like planting food, does that change our biology? And to be honest, the answer is yes. And so the environmental deterministic part is a vital component of cultural anthropology, but also ties into biological anthropology because it is seen as um, something that causes us to react, and actually something that causes us to try to control. Right, we're essentially trying to control the environment culturally by rerouting rivers, creating canals, those kinds of things, bringing water to our agricultural sites. So again, this is one of those things as well. This the ability to mass produce food, which is what you see here. This is actually not monocropping. This is diverse agricultural structure. Increases human population or allows the increase of human population, and it actually just not only justifies it, but it promotes it. Once the state starts to uh, have more people and the process of growth, the goal here is to have more children so that you have more workers that can produce more food that then produces more wealth and produces more tax money for the state, which then creates this kind of structure of growth. And again, I think that human population is an interesting thing that is promoted during certain times, and then like in our system currently, where it's the digital age, the number of children couples are having is dropped off, and a lot of that has to do with automation. And because we're no longer an agricultural society, we've become more of a tech society, and technology is actually doing our agriculture. So there's some interesting kind of things. It tends to be that hunter-gatherer groups have 2 to 3 children per couple, and then we get horticulture, and it goes up to 3 to 4 people in the gardens. And then when we get agriculture, it goes all the way up to 5 to 7 children. And then when we see a decline currently with the digital age because we have automation. Ingenuity in terms of food storage, this has to do with things like silos, grain storage, um, keeping grain dry and away from pests is the key here. And this is when essentially cats domesticate themselves. They come in to live with humans in order to feed off the rodent population that is there because we're storing grains. Um, this process of agriculture is actually what we call intensive rather than extensive. And the description here is hunter gatherers had an extensive form of subsistence, which means they covered wide swaths of land and had to walk large distances, long distances, to get to other food products. Now, this built in our exercise. So many hunter gatherer groups stayed in physical shape. And groups that relied more on hunting, that would have been harder on your body. Groups that did more foraging, like Native Americans, kind of in California, they didn't live as difficult lives because they were not reliant on meat products necessarily. They actually rather have plant products. So again, the extensive subsistence strategy is to cover wide swaths of land in order to get enough food products for you. Intensive is essentially you're stuck, like these individuals in this picture, in a specific plot of land doing intensive work. It's smaller swaths of land, but the work is intense, right? And it's repetitive and it's backbreaking and it's all of those other things. So this is where we actually get some biological effects of agriculture, which is back problems, varicose veins, leg problems, hip dysplasia. We also get osteoporosis, and we get some of these other things where this intensive agriculture actually has negative effects on our bodies. So diffusion of agriculture, what we get here is the spread of agricultural products. For instance, corn is the one that I really, or maize is the one that I really, really like to talk about. This diffusion is simply the transfer of information or the transfer of a product from one group to another. It's not forced on any group, but it's traded, and it's again, it can be symbolic goods, which are religious ideology, or it could be real material goods like corn kernels or maize. And maize went from Mesoamerica, kind of in the heart of Central America, Mexico area, and it goes all the way up to New York. It goes to the Colorado River, and then it goes all the way down to the Incan populations and group and pre-Inca really into kind of Peru areas. Now, that's a wide swath of land. It happens over thousands of years, but it's through trade and diffusion, right? It's through these peripheral cultural areas where you pass things off to people through trade. Now, some people resisted this. Some people did not want to garden. Some people did not want to grow food because they realized that it was more work for them. Also, maybe they didn't like the way corn tasted and they weren't going to replace their own products. Over time, though, different groups pick these things up, and essentially corn is a big one that is now worldwide, right? So ideas spread more than people moving. So it's not necessarily that you have to move to these things, but when we go to trade something, again, it's not that people from Mesoamerica had to go all the way up to New York or all the way down to Peru to transfer these things. It's essentially through these peripheral zones of trade, connecting each group to the next group. Superfoods is an interesting one. Superfoods is the idea of really, really healthy food. It's not just what we would consider food. And food would be your grain products. And again, meats, right, are food products. When we get into superfoods, we're talking about things like garlic, onions, your leafy greens, those things with a lot of antioxidants is what we're terming superfoods these days. The Columbian Exchange is on actually the next page that I wanted to talk about. So you may want to freeze the lecture here just to study this a little bit. You can see that all the diseases essentially are coming from the old world: smallpox, influenza, the flu. And the old world, we're talking about Africa, Europe, Asia, and then the new world: North America, South America, Central America. And you can see all the things coming over, right? So all the grain products: wheat, rice, barley, oats, which are vital to a lot of our own grain production, livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses. We did not have any of these things in the New World prior to 1492 when Columbus came across the ocean. Peaches, pears, coffee is coming from the Old World, olives, onions, garlic. And then the New World had your squashes, your pumpkins, sweet potatoes, all peppers, spicy peppers, hot peppers. So again, all your spicy food that's in the Old World currently, like Korean spicy food or Thai, was not spicy before this. And then also tomatoes, potatoes, turkeys, peanuts, corn, chocolate, vanilla, tobacco. All of that stuff is coming from the New World and going to the Old World. So realize that food has changed dramatically, right? So Italians did not have marinara sauce prior to the tomato going back over there. Pineapples is on there. Pineapples are actually coming from the Caribbean as one of the first things that Columbus actually took back to the Old World to show how kind of crazy the different the foods were. And so really, to be honest, I use this framing a lot. If you look at the food products from the New World to the Old World, these are all very healthy, maybe minus tobacco. All the stuff coming from the Old World, a lot of that is like sugarcane, right? A lot of those things are, and the animal products, and then the disease, a lot of those are associated with kind of some negatives. So we have some interesting kind of things here. Essentially, the New World was this, I would say, biological utopia. It had amazing superfoods. Avocados are also from the New World. Amazing superfoods, and no disease. The Old World had some superfoods, of course, garlic, onions, those kinds of things, but it had all the disease. And then it had the relationship with the animal domestication as well. So again, you can look at this graph. This graph is fascinating in terms of population. This graph says everything, to be honest. So if we're looking at 1000 AD, we're less than a billion people. It's in the millions here, and then we jump up dramatically worldwide. We're up to 7.4 billion currently, and this is just 20 years ago. So the agricultural structure and the state promotion of continued growth of family, continued work, continued growth of the economic system, essentially promotes population. So again, we have 10,000 years ago, you had no more than 2 to 3 million people on the planet. 2 to 3 million people on the planet. And 2 to 3 million people, you're looking at, Sacramento, kind of Stockton area of the valley, San Diego, kind of in that general area is essentially the population of the planet. There was plenty of space for people to go. There was plenty of natural resources to hunt and gather and forage. So we didn't have that competition of what people would say resources, and really what the competing resource is currently is water. At 2,000 years ago, the population increased to 250 to 300 million. So you can see that spike just dramatically goes up over this kind of 8,000 years time period. And then by 1850, we had 1 billion. So that's 170 years ago. We had 1 billion people, and 170 years later, we have 7.1 billion. And this is really because agriculture has spread around the world. It's not just in these locations where populations are booming, but essentially we've, through diffusion, have spread agriculture throughout all the parts of the world. So population does this initial climb, which is still happening in places like India. China, starting to drop off in the digital age. It has here, it has in Europe, it has in Japan already, Korea. So again, essentially these newly developing kind of industrialized agricultural zones are an initial stage of growth for the state. And then when they grow, then essentially they flatline and then start to decline. Some of the issues are environmental degradation. Clear cutting of trees for wood and fire and building materials is a big problem. This increases our CO2 production, but it also creates erosion. And then we overuse that land because now we're also growing crops in that area that we cut down those trees. And really what this also creates is places for things like malaria. So malaria did not exist prior to agriculture. We create zones of pockets of water that mosquitoes can then grow, and then human population to spread that disease to human. We do have climate shifts, so no rain, no water is a problem, obviously, when you need agriculture. Overfishing and over use of natural resources is a big component currently in our world that we talk about a lot. And some of the effects of our biology, masticatory functional hypothesis is the skull changes are responding to the decreased demands of chewing muscles. So I think that again, when I was kind of just trying to justify maybe softer food, is that our jaws themselves don't need to be as strong because we're not just chomping on hard leafy material or plant matter all day long. Pottery's effect. So I talked about soups, softer foods, those kinds of things. Teeth don't change as much as the jaws. So we have underbites and overbites. So again, our teeth are still large. People are starting to be born without wisdom teeth, which is making up for that issue. To be honest, in another few generations, it may be that wisdom teeth are not something that we even need to do surgery on. Teeth last longer because of soft foods. So our teeth are actually healthier because we're also not necessarily chomping on all those sand and grit structure that I've talked about earlier. Some of the other changes to our body, though, is bones have shrunk over the last 20,000 years. And it's because technology is replacing a lot of that. If you don't use it, you lose it. And osteoarthritis is a degenerative change in joints. And this is a picture of somebody with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inheritable disease. Infectious disease has increased, lived in unsanitary conditions, STDs, flu, all of those things are essentially because of agriculture or domestication of animals, and then humans living in close contact with them. Dental caries are another way of saying cavities. And the more we have carbohydrates, so farming, the more cavities we've gotten. Hunter-gatherers did not have dental caries as far as we know. And enamel hypoplasias are essentially the defect relating to nourishment common in agricultural revolution. So we had a lot of, during the agricultural revolution, we changed our diet, and actually the average age of mortality rate, people started dying younger during agriculture, the initial stages, because we went monocropped and our bodies are not set for that. We need more of those superfoods. So enamel hypoplasia happens here. Heme iron is found in meat and fish. Non-heme iron is found in plants and isn't as absorbed as well. So this is one of those things that humans need to have that balanced diet approach. Some of the continued changes, again, anemia, right? We have expansion of porosity of cranial bones. So with anemia, you actually get holes kind of in your bone, and that's essentially you're lacking that iron structure. And again, this is cerebroorbitallia is the same. There's kind of holes in the bone. Height decline with the lack of protein. Now we've started to grow our height because protein goes up. Global warming. Key term here is anthropogenic. Any effect caused by humans. And then the change of perception of time. We are totally into future tense now. So let's talk about tomorrow.